Chaff. Coming up this week.
I am definitely also a vehicle hater.
Okay, good.
That's why Tyler whispers card names to his daughter in her sleep every night, right?
Exactly. That's the long-term plan in motion. You gotta get it going.
Nightmare.
The players here aren't that good. I'm not that good. I'm not that different from the player I was a year ago.
What's up, aficionados? Welcome back to Draft Chaff. This is episode 226. Joining me on the line, as usual, is Tyler. But joining me on the line, as not usual, is Ryan. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Always an honor to have a guest on, especially someone who's done pretty well for themselves at a Pro Tour and Worlds and an Arena Championship and all sorts of stuff, right?
Yeah, this past year has been kind of crazy. I had been playing the game for like 15 or so years and then only kind of recently broke through and have been grinding really hard to try to, stay on and do well. And so far it's been working.
That's awesome. You are officially the most successful guest we've ever had on the podcast or host for that matter. Well, before we get into a conversation with Ryan about all things pro drafting, a couple introductory reminders. If you are not in the Discord, please hop over into there. We've got all sorts of stuff going on. We've got trophy channels. We've got pick channels. We've got stuff to talk about spoilers. And there were actually some pretty sweet announcements this past weekend at the Pro Tour. Did we talk about Avatar coming to Magic yet? I am stoked for that.
There's too many things to keep track of, too. There's we got the Final Fantasy, now Spider-Man, but now Con spoilers are coming out, too. And
yeah,
some of those are looking real sweet. I'm excited for those.
Yeah, you saw the baby Siege Rhino?
Oh. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, I got to send this to Ben. And of course, you've already saw it, but it's such a U card.
No, I love it. I'm not going to pass it ever. Anyway, thank you in addition to our patrons. Y'all are the best. We love you. You keep the show going. If you are interested in supporting this nonsense on Patreon, hop on over there. You can see the full unedited show with all of the outtakes and other nonsense that manages to slip past my editing. It's something different every week. You never know what you're going to get. Now, let's start things off with our typical crack a draft. So, Ryan, I understand this is from a recent draft of yours. Am I to understand this right, that you value, is it Skyseer's Chariot and then Brightfield Mustang? Is this the ideal start?
So I chose a draft that would kind of embarrass myself when people first looked at it. This was one of my Pro Tour practice drafts, and normally you do those on MTGO, the single elimination queues, because they're full of really good pros practicing for the Pro Tour. They're kind of the highest stakes draft you can do online. And I disconnected for the first two picks of this. So this was MTGO's judgment call, not mine. Normally here, I would definitely take the green-white rare. I forget what her name is. Something Caradora?
Yeah, Caradora.
I think she's awesome. But yeah, MTGO decided differently. So that's what I had in my pool when I found out, oh, shoot, I'm drafting.
Yeah.
The ultimate test is to just let it go for you and then make it work in the end. Really learn how to make those cards work.
Yeah, and I kind of halfway did that here. I lost my first two picks, as you see. I don't think any reasonable person would take Brightfield Mustang second pick, but when you have a white rare in your pool, that's what Auto Picker thinks is good. So that's what it takes.
I'm almost surprised it took the Brightfield Mustang over the Pride of the Road. I'm surprised it didn't just go by rarity at that point.
I know. Clearly, I think it's not totally random because there's most of the time when I miss picks, it comes back with a set of cards in a similar color. But it's also not just a linear take the highest rarity card of the color you have the most of, because it's not doing that here. So I have no idea what their algorithm is. It must be at least somewhat interesting.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about this pack 1 pick 3. This is where you came back in. Tell us how you got yourself back on track here.
Yeah, so this is now Ryan drafting. Thankfully, we've got strong hands on the wheels again. So my approach, and I kind of think this is somewhat of a lesson for drafting in general, is I really like to stay open. I like to stay flexible. I like to read the seat that I'm in, and often I abandon my first pick. I think I do that more than most people. And in this draft, I basically just try to treat it as a draft where my first two picks were just unimpressive and I didn't really get anything I had valued highly out of them, and try to treat it like, oh, this is my pack 1 pick 1 and kind of see where I go from there. Luckily, there kind of is a pack 1 pick 1-able card in here. the Mindspring Merfolk.
Mm.
It's not, I would say, like a bomb, but it's very strong, probably better than most of the commons. And so I kind of just tried to ignore what I had so far and went with what I saw was the best card in the pack. I don't know. Do you guys see anything else that you would be heavily considering here? Maybe like the white enchantment, the aura.
Yeah, the roadside assistance.
Some people are really high on that. Some people are not
Yeah.
very high on it at all.
I'm shocked that
What do you
Merfolk made
guys-
even 2-pick 3 here, to be honest. I'm shocked. I want to know what were in the first 2 packs that were worth
Yeah.
picking over this.
Yeah, I agree that this is sort of like a good role player rare. It's a card you always happen to have in your deck, right? Yeah, the rest of this pack, I mean, this is something that I'm starting to notice about this format. I think the power level across the rest of these cards is pretty flat. There's nothing that particularly jumps out to me. Honestly, the Voyager Quick Welder is maybe the thing I might take next in this pack. I'm one of those anti-roadside assistance people. Just playing auras and limited, I love it, but I've trained myself off of it. And this one has a little bit of incentive in that you can enchant a vehicle that maybe could avoid some sorcery speed removal or creature exclusive removal. But a lot of the kill spells in this format hit vehicles too, even a lot of the instants.
Yeah, it's a very swingy card. High upside, but quite high downside.
And I see in your pick 4 here, you were able to pick up a Migrating Ketrodon. Do you mind telling us a little bit about this pick?
Yeah, I mean, I think this card is like one of the defining cards of the format. It is green's ultimate stabilization play, and you are pretty happy to play like 3, 4, 5 of them even in a deck, just because the cycling really lets you kind of use it to hit your land drops if you need to, if you have multiples in hand. It's a card I pretty much value early in a draft over kind of any other common for the most part, especially just green being the strongest color, and if it's available, I want to be in it. So I think it was like a pretty easy pickup here. The other thing to think about would be like the Guidelight Pathmaker, maybe, because it's kind of a signpost in blue-white. And I do technically already have 2 white cards as well as a blue card. But I think this is another example of like, I'm basically ignoring the first 2 cards that I've gotten because they're not very good. I'm not really considering like myself to be in white, even though those were the first 2 picks.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, on 17 lands, there's an analysis tool that lets you see the percentage of times you play your first pick. And I think I remember that it gives you some sort of feedback about it. Do you happen to know which one that is?
Yeah, I do. I've looked at it before, and I pretty consistently play my first pick less frequently than most drafters, and even most like drafters around my like win percentage or something. So I don't know, maybe that's a leak or a flaw in my drafting, or maybe it's like a thing that's giving me some kind of advantage. Not really sure, but it's a really interesting tool. 17 lands for people who don't like pay for their Patreon or whatever it is. Like, I would highly recommend that. They do a great service for the community and really cool personal data too that you can get.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're really a great service. I can't really remember playing limited before 17 lands.
Yeah, seriously, me neither. I got like much more back into limited once around the time where 17 lands started becoming really popular and Arena Open started coming to Arena. That was like, you know, the perfect combination to get back into high level Magic.
Listening to a pro player draft, this is like so much more analytical than, you know, the way I draft. I'm so go by my vibe and feel, because I totally would have slammed the Pathfinder here, knowing what I had as my first 2 picks, and then followed up with the Merfolk in the third. But you're looking at the data a lot more than I'd say the average player is, and your understanding of limited is, I don't know, it's refreshing to hear, I guess.
It's interesting you say the word vibe, because that's actually a word we use a lot, like vibes in the testing house. And it's sort of a proxy for like intuition.
Okay.
A lot of pro players approach this differently. Like, some players really, really like going by 17 lands data and kind of swear by it. Some players and some teams, I would say, more Sanctum falls along this line. We're more about the vibes of a format. Sometimes those vibes will line up with what 17 lands is showing, or sometimes we think something different is going on.
Interesting.
In this set, we definitely happened to agree a lot with the data and thought that green was just the strongest color by far.
Gotcha.
But that's not always the case. And we do sometimes just go off of like personal intuition, like you're saying. It's just, I think, an intuition that we've tried really hard to train, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. The more you play Magic, the more you kind of just feel out what is and doesn't work. Like, I feel like pre-releases work really well for players like us because it's very intuition based because nobody's seen these cards, nobody's played with these cards, and that's why I always 3-0 pre-releases and never anything else again. Yeah,
You do know how to crush a pre-release.
Like it is a distinct skill to evaluate cards that most people haven't seen before that you're just reading for the first time. Like that's a thing that not everyone can do at a high level. I think that's a weakness of mine, honestly, is like I'm not as good at. Do you guys do the MTG data science thing on Blue Sky where the pack 0 pick 1?
Big fan.
For some reason, I'm a very good limited player. I always end up in like the middle third.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why. So I ended up blue-green splashing black for some like non-rare cards in black. Like the Pact Altair is just a common. Haunt the Network is a very good uncommon. But like splashing that off of Veloheart Bike is something I'm a big fan of. And yeah, it's just like solid blue and green cards, which are my favorite colors in the format, I would say.
How highly do you favor the bike? Because the bike is a card I've been kind of decisive about. I'm not quite sure where I stand on it. It feels slow, but I see there's 2 of them in this deck, and I guess you made it work.
Yeah, my teammate Jason, who was like an incredible player, one of the Player of the Year runner-ups last year, sold me on bike really early on in the format. It was basically saying that like everything kind of trades off in the end, and bike can both be a mana ramper and then just a relevant creature later, when that kind of stops being super useful. Green really likes splashing. It's got like artifact synergies. The 2 life gain is just kind of nice as well to help stabilize you a little bit. I think bike is a very good green common. Not that that's saying much because all of the green commons are like very good.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know exactly where to prioritize it in drafts, but this is definitely a format where I want to try to fit as much power in my deck as possible, and like incidental ways to splash certainly help that. So I do try to value it pretty highly.
Nice. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I noticed you have a couple of the engineers, the 2-mana 1/3s. Big fan of that card, and I love the Sky Serpent Seeker, the signpost.
The signpost is awesome. That's like my roommate Mora's favorite card from this set, the flying snake.
Oh yeah.
Blue green, like classic effect, just getting lands out of your deck. The 1/3, the engineer flyer, was like known as like Ryan's 1/3 flyer or whatever in the house because I was super high on that card. I really like it with light wheel enhancements. You can make like a 4/7 or a 4/6 or whatever it is.
That's
flying
strong.
Vigilance, which is pretty hard for them to answer. It also just like builds speed kind of for free with that combo. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of that card. I think it's just like really, really solid blue 2-drop at common that makes your deck better kind of no matter what.
Now, to actually go back to the bike, Tyler and I were discussing this on a previous episode, whether we prefer the bike or the pothole mole. So out of curiosity, if you had the opportunity, would you swap 1 or 2 of those bikes for a pothole mole?
In this deck, I think probably not. The Pack Doll and the Haunt the Network both want artifacts. And I guess also like the Mindspring Merfolk kind of likes you ramping a little bit. So there's like a bunch of little things that the bike's mana does a little bit better than the pothole. And I don't think if I'm scanning through, there's a lot of like graveyard stuff going on here. I guess there's like the Dredger's Insight, but that I don't think pothole triggers that, right? Because it only triggers creatures and artifacts. So yeah, I think I do just prefer each copy of bike over a pothole mole in this deck, but like they're reasonably close. I think the deck certainly wouldn't be much worse if one was swapped.
Yeah, for sure.
Me and Ben are just big vehicle haters, I think, and the bike just has intrinsic value where it's not really a creature most of the time, but it does become a great blocker and attacker at certain points because that 4 power really does matter, it seems, in this format.
I am definitely also a vehicle hater in this deck.
Good.
If you'll notice, this deck has, I think, 0 other vehicles.
Okay.
You can really only have like 1 or 2, maybe
Sure.
3 vehicles that are not crewing themselves in a deck by default. I think like, yeah, there are other, limited podcasters that kind of emphasize that rule. So yeah, I think that like you really don't want many of them, but the bike does enough work of being a card that isn't a vehicle that I think like the body can just be an extra bonus on top instead of like the thing that it needs to be good.
With that, I think we should grill you a little bit here. before we get to all the fancy Pro Tour stuff, who actually are you?
I'm Ryan. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just like a longtime Magic player who, I mean, I've been playing the game for 15 plus years since I was like 13. We'll maybe get into that later. But like, I've just been playing a long time. I qualified for an arena championship last year and kind of decided like, hey, this is my shot. I'm really going to try to maximize it. So I had already kind of been wanting to leave the tech job I was in at that point, and so I kind of decided like now's the time. Went for it, and I've been trying to like make it in the professional competitive scene for the past year. Um, yeah, I am a member of Team Sanctum of All. Want to give them a shout out. They're like one of the best teams out there right now, and a totally open invite to players of marginalized gender, which I think is awesome and something I really want to promote in the competitive scene. Yeah, that's it. I'm Ryan. I'm a Magic Pro. Feels
Yeah,
weird to say.
that's awesome. You're really kind of an exemplar of what they advertise, right? Where look, you can be playing Arena on your phone one day, and then some number of days later, you sit down at a Pro Tour, right?
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I've played the game and wanted to like make it to the Pro Tour for a really long time, but I'm also one of the biggest proponents for Arena Opens, as I think like a really good way to get Arena limited players invested in the competitive scene and able to like win really good prizes. I started doing them with my roommate Laura, who's also an incredible and very accomplished player when they kind of started. We've never missed one, I think. They're just so fun. And like that's kind of how I started taking Arena pretty seriously and like limited on there pretty seriously a couple years ago. And look what happened, you know, played some qualifiers, ended up getting an incredible pool in one of them and making day two and winning on day two with another incredible pool. You kind of got to get lucky. But yeah, like I think the way Wizards set up the arena competitive system ended up working out extremely well for me, and I'm very grateful for that.
Sounds like the dream. I'd love to get there. So we're talking about arena and how that kind of got you into the Pro Tour and that type of stuff. What other advice, I guess, could you give people to kind of get into the Pro Tour, like Pro Magic, like getting on a team and how that kind of benefits that kind of play style as well?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, one of the first things I would just say is that like it took me a really, really long time to get to the Pro Tour, and I
Mhm.
think that can be both an encouraging thing because it means that like your journey is never really done, and you shouldn't be disappointed if it doesn't happen right away. And I, for a long time, thought like, oh, I'm probably never going to be good enough or never going to make it, that kind of thing. And then it just kind of happened one day, and it could happen to you. I don't want to, you know, be like selling like a gambling mentality or
Yeah,
anything, but like, you
it's
know,
a pyramid
Magic
scheme.
is a game with high variance, and it can take a really, really long time to get good enough at it or to have that right combination of luck and skill. Um, but also, I just think like probably the biggest thing that's helped me succeed after I kind of broke through and like stay successful on the Pro Tour this past year is has really been, I mean, obviously like I have a lot of privilege in terms of being able to spend a lot of time without working a different job and just trying to be really, really, really good at Magic and practice all the time. So that's the main thing. But I think as part of that, you can practice Magic in a really effective way, in a very mindful way, or you can practice just by playing a ton and really not getting significantly better. And I think the biggest advice I would give is to try to make the sort of quote unquote boring self improvement parts of playing the game fun and engaging and like something you actively want to do.
Hmm.
Those are not going to be fun for everyone. Doing slow game log reviews where you're trying to analyze your mistakes and see where you went wrong and see what you could be doing differently, like that's not always fun because people often just tie their ego to how good they are currently at Magic. And so I think tying your ego more to how good you are at learning Magic and how good you are at improving at it, I think is the thing I would say is like going to help you the most in a really long term way. It's a game about learning, which is why I love it so much. And honestly, why I think so many like teachers like you are, Ben, gravitate to it.
Guilty.
So yeah, like being good at learning, and obviously being good at teaching is part of being good at learning, because you're able to break things down and chunk them into ways that are digestible, is a huge part of it. And I think taking pride in that instead of taking pride in like being really smart and already knowing everything is the way to go.
Yes, like with any great skill, it takes practice, time. So that makes sense. So thank you. Can you tell us a little more about the team too? Like, is it something that like you reach out to? Does the team reach out to you? And how beneficial is it for you as a pro player?
Yeah, I mean, as I'm saying, this like learning thing, you need to learn from other people. You need to
Mhm.
play with people who are better than you, or at least just like different from you and have different skills and strengths. Um, Sanctum specifically will generally reach out to people who like, usually it's by pronouns on Melee.
Oh,
If they have
interesting.
any pronouns other than he, him, like you'll typically get a reach out if you qualify for either a Pro Tour or sometimes an RC. The RC is kind of the like level where you get you can join the Discord, or you can certainly like reach out to someone and ask to join the Discord for Sanctum, and there's like 200 people in there or something, so it's not like a very
Wow.
tight knit team. It's kind of just a large community of
Mhm.
people of marginalized gender, allies, whatever, just people kind of who are interested in learning the game and kind of want to be a part of this space, I would say. And they do some pretty serious testing for RCs. Like there are channels for every constructed deck in a certain format,
Oh
and
wow.
people discussing those decks like most of the day, every day online. People will be looking for matches and trying to test specific matchups. And then as well, if you actually qualify for a Pro Tour, Sanctum will have specific like Discord groups for the Pro Tour team, which tends to be anywhere between 5 and like 20 people. It was really big
Oh
this
wow.
time, and it's been growing over time as more people in this, marginalized gender space like reach the Pro Tour. So that's been really exciting to see. And yeah, I mean, Sanctum is a incredible environment. Everyone there is like very positive. It's really encouraged to share your ideas and not feel like you have to kind of wait for someone more experienced to sort of say the thing that you were going to say or anything like that. It's very like open, and everyone is willing to be wrong, I think, and that's like a huge part of learning and growing. And it's just that energy of like, we're all in this together, no one knows everything, and we're all just trying to figure this out.
That's awesome. That's the best kind of learning environment. And it does make me pretty proud to be a Magic player at some times, where I think there may have at one point been this sort of stereotype of what a Magic player looks like. And it's great to see that kind of broken in every way possible at this point by people of every life experience.
Totally. And like, honestly, I just find it incredibly affirming and exciting that like we're really showing that that is actually not the way to win. You can't be this like super tight, like very kind of competitive and hyper focused on winning all the time person who is gatekeeping people away from the community and only talking to players who are like better than you or more skilled than you or who you respect enough or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone contributing ideas, everyone kind of bringing what they can to the table is actually a better way to win at a super high level. And I mean, like I've said, Sanctum has some of the best players on the Pro Tour right now. And I'm like very lucky to be able to work with them.
I think you can be a little less humble. I think you're one of those people.
Well, thank you. I've gotten a lot better at the game over the past year. So I think I'm at least getting there or able to imitate really well the people who I've kind of learned from.
I mean, they say that the more you learn and the more skilled you are in a certain thing, the more you recognize what you lack, right? The more I learned about physics, the more I realized how little I actually knew. And I think Magic
That
is
is
probably the
so
same.
true for Magic. It's so true. I mean, I've realized how many things I'm actually bad at in Magic over
Mhm.
this past year. As I've had all of the results showing me like you're getting better, it's been like, yeah, but there's still so much I'm bad at and need to learn. It's a
That's the
really
beauty
fun
of
feeling.
learning,
It's
isn't
really
it?
exciting. Yeah, exactly.
Now, to switch entirely to a different gear here, this is a bit of a tradition on the podcast, but we do ask every guest, if you were a potato, how would you want to be prepared?
I love it. I've been giving long answers to everything. I'll give a short answer to this one. Mash me up, please. Put me in the pile with everyone else and just throw me in. I love it.
That's probably the best answer. It makes me hungry to think about.
Yeah.
Tyler, what's your answer to this? I don't know if I've ever asked you.
Yeah, see, it feels such like I feel like a poser saying mashed potatoes, but that is objectively the best potato.
I actually personally prefer fries, but in terms of me getting prepared, I don't know. I feel like mashing philosophical just feels more like physically satisfying.
You'd enjoy the experience of being mashed.
Yeah, I do use like a weighted blanket at home to sleep, so that feels like kind of a similar energy.
And it warms you up too, just a little slab of butter on top, and you're totally there.
Yeah, exactly.
Potatoes au gratin. Final answer. That's it.
Wow, fancy. Maybe like a scalloped potato, like a nice sauce.
I like that.
I'm hungry now, man. Let's pause and let's all go get dinner.
Cut.
Let's stick away from the magic for a minute, because I think we're going to talk a lot about magic coming up here. Give me your favorite fictional character.
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot, and I have so many fictional characters that I love. The one I happen to this one, I would say, is Luoji from Three Body Problem. I don't know if you guys have read that series. Very, very good sci-fi series. They recently had a show come out on Netflix, and another one in China. There was like a different version of it that was also very good. I also watched. Without giving too much away, but the story of this character is really cool. He is sort of assigned to, I'm not going to get too far into it, but come up with a plan that will sort of deceive all of humanity, as well as using a lot of humanity's resources, like their military and all of that stuff. So he's kind of this guy who's supposed to come up with a strategic plan, but not tell anyone what it is, and implement it without revealing what it is. And the thing he comes up with is just very cool, very brilliant, and I find it super fascinating. His story. There's more there, but just a little teaser for people to try to get them to read the series. Yeah.
Is this this is inspired by the actual literal Three Body Problem in some way, right?
Yeah. Again, without trying to give too much away, it's one of those books where there's some puzzles to solve in it, and so I don't want to
the less you know, the better. Yeah.
But that actual scientific concept is a very important plot concept for the book. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
Now, maybe let's start pushing back into magic a little bit. How did you first start playing magic? It's always fun hearing people's stories about this.
Yeah, I feel like mine's kind of a classic. I just got taught by a friend when I was 13 or 14, maybe 12, I don't even know, on a family vacation. He brought some decks, and I remember one of the cards in them was Hearthfire Hobgoblin, I think, from Lorwyn or Shadowmoor or something like that. It's red white hybrid, red white hybrid, red white hybrid, 2/2 double strike. And that card seemed insane to me. I was like, double strike? That's so incredible. If you pump it up, it becomes so big. And so I just remember I was just obsessed from the moment I played. It's just an incredible game. I started going to a club at a local library that we had that just had a bunch of kids who would play, and I started winning a lot there, and that was kind of addictive of a feeling.
Helped.
And so I started going to the competitive store, Pandemonium Books and Games, shout out, in Boston. Great store, still going today. I would take the train into the city on Fridays to play FNM there.
It's fun.
Started doing more competitive tournaments, and the rest is kind of history. Yeah.
But did you say you had taken a break or a gap, or you just hadn't been interested in competitive for a little bit?
I wouldn't exactly call it a break, but I think throughout end of high school and college, and then maybe a couple years after graduating college, I had sort of decided I'm not going to go all out trying to qualify for the Pro Tour. I'm going to sort of fit Magic into my life, as it would naturally fit into my life. I'm going to play it as much as I enjoy it, and sort of, keep it as a hobby, basically. A competitive hobby for sure, and one that I really tried to get better at. But I would say I was not chasing the dream, and I'd kind of convinced myself that like that probably wasn't a very smart thing to do, and I really do think it isn't unless you happen to kind of luck into a qualification and really want to give it your best shot, which ended up happening. But yeah, I mean, until that like arena open sort of thing happened, I was more on and off, and like I was a really good drafter and played a ton of limited just because it was super fun. But I I would not have called myself a grinder, probably, I guess is how I'd put it.
Sure.
But I do think like playing the game continuously for all that time was pretty important for just slowly, getting better, building like my background and my theory and all that stuff. Yeah, I think like it's such a hard game, such a complicated game that playing for a really, really long time can really help you just have the foundation for becoming, a lot better really quickly.
That's why Tyler whispers card names to his daughter in her sleep every night, right?
Exactly. That's the long-term plan in motion. You got to get it going.
Nightmare. All right, and finally here, I feel like this is a question you have to ask everybody who plays Magic. What is your favorite card of all time? It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, there's both so many, and it's also really hard to think of just like one. I think probably the answer I have to give for this is Birthing Pod. It's a very
Nice.
classic favorite card. I loved playing that when it was a deck in Modern. Just like such a cool concept of having a toolbox deck. That's like such a fascinating Magic concept. I'm mostly a limited player, so it's weird picking a constructed card, I guess, but
It feels
that is a
blasphemous.
card I'm just super in love with. Yeah.
Very nice.
Did you do any testing with the blue artifact one that got printed recently in this last set?
We very much did. We had a is it Radiant Lotus, the 6-mana artifact that stacks things to make it all into Black Lotuses deck with Boommobile. So you make a ton of mana and you hit them for 20 with the Boommobile. And that was obviously like a pod deck where you could go find the Lotus, find the Boommobile.
Yeah.
It was playing Enigma Jewel as well to like activate abilities, a Soul Ring for that. Yeah. Really, really cool deck. And it was almost good enough. Actually, a person not on our team played a very similar list at the Pro Tour.
Wow.
And did pretty well with it. So yeah, that's like a real deck you can play in Standard now. It's very cool.
Cool.
Very cool. Let's transition into a little bit of a Pro Tour recap. So we can focus mainly on your drafts, but I want to chat a little bit about Constructed later on. What's it like drafting at the Pro Tour?
It's super cool. Like it's really awesome just to have. I mean, any limited junkie I think could appreciate just like a super duper high stakes draft where everyone you're playing against really cares about it, is going to be doing their absolute best. You get a called draft, so the judges are saying like, you have 40 seconds to make your pick, 5-second warning, okay, pass the cards, count them out, that kind of thing. It's stressful for sure. Like you care a lot about it, and draft can be high variance, just like all of Magic. So you're really hoping you open a good rare in your first pack. That's like all you're thinking about in the minutes leading up to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also think like having a draft, especially pod draft at a high level, is just super interesting, and I think way different from drafting online, where there's just a lot of players in there who probably aren't, completely on top of things, and green tends to be really open in formats where green's really good, and so you end up drafting the same deck a lot of the time. That doesn't happen at high level pod drafts because draft is self-correcting and people are going to be scooping up the good cards, and you have to get scrappy with it and play interesting things and make sure you're building your deck responsibly and figuring out different ways to kind of maneuver into a good position. You also care about getting that last win. We'll get into it later. Like when you're 0-2, you really, really care about going 1-2 instead of 0-3. And I just think having those kinds of stakes at every round, making sure you can, scrape out as many wins as possible with a deck that you're not super happy with, that's like also just really exciting and fun. And like, I think, yeah, it's just a great experience, honestly.
So, what was your testing process like? You mentioned before that you've been doing some like posting trophies and that you've been doing drafts, of course, on MTGO. But was that anything in person?
Yeah. So one of the things Sanctum does that I think makes us one of the better teams at Limited, besides just having a bunch of really strong Limited players, is we try to get together as early as possible and draft the set in person. So we get together basically the first weekend where we can, and we do just nonstop drafts over an entire weekend, which
Sounds
is
like a lot of
obviously
fun.
a very fun weekend.
Yeah.
And we're like learning the set at the same time as we're doing this, and we're all in between drafts just having discussions about like, okay, this card overperformed, this card underperformed, this deck felt like it didn't quite come together, I was just sciencing, I was trying something, and it feels like that's probably not something to go for or whatever. I'm thinking now of the push the limit deck which we were trying out a lot over
Mm.
that first weekend. And yeah, like I think reps are just something that's incredibly important, and paper feels different from playing MTGO, feels different from playing Arena. And at the Pro Tour, you're going to be playing in paper. So you want as many reps on that as possible. And getting experience with the cards as soon as you can is just very important. The turnaround for Pro Tours is really short. We also have to be worrying about constructed at the same time. And so having a weekend where everyone can get together and just mono focus on draft, I think is a really good way to start out and kind of set a baseline so that we can go out from there. And like I was saying, play these MTGO single elims on our own individually and kind of come back and compare notes and share the screenshots of decks that did well or did poorly. But starting out with that baseline of everyone has drafted for like 8 to 10 times in the same room over the course of a weekend is like really valuable.
Did you have any archetypes that you favored over others? Any colors? Any particular cards you were hoping to see in that first pack?
It's really interesting. Like, I wanted to be green. Everyone said they wanted to be green in these Pro
Right.
Tour drafts, and I think that's true. Like, some seats, you can really fight for it because you open a green rare, and then some packs just have enough good green commons that it doesn't matter if the person to your right is in green. But some seats, I think, genuinely like can't do that. So my strong preference was to be green, but at the same time, I had done a couple single limbs in the week leading up to the Pro Tour in between constructed testing. And for some reason, I had drafted blue-white like 3 times in a row. I was not trying to. This was not like intentional. This was just kind of where those decks and those seats ended up. And then I also ended up drafting blue-white twice at the Pro Tour. I don't know what kind of bias this is that I have. There must be something there going on, but the drafts did feel very different, and it didn't feel like I sort of ended up there through forcing or through strong preferences. One deck was much more blue, one deck was much more white, and the other colors were just kind of what I found to support them. We'll get into the specifics of the drafts, but for some reason, I seem, I guess, to have a preference towards blue-white. It's funny, like, what can kind of manifest and you don't even realize it's happening, but it's important to, like, take note of it and try to understand why.
Mhm. So let's get into these drafts. I have up here your first deck, right?
Yep. Yeah, this is the first one. This one was the one I really liked. This was much better than the second.
Anything interesting about the draft itself? What was your pack one pick one from this?
My pack one pick one was Stampeding Scurryfoot, the green common that
Smart.
makes an elephant. So
Yeah.
just to show everyone, I was really trying to get into green. I think I picked that over a common that I think was like better than it by a little bit, but I strongly preferred to be in green. And then halfway through pack one, like toward the end of pack one, I picked up a couple white cards. I picked up like a Bulwark Ox that you see in there, the like white rare 2-drop that gives things counters with saddles. But I thought I was in blue green. That was like my assumption. I had picked up the Rangers Refueler, I think, and then I had the Scurryfoot, and I had like a couple other green commons that were decent. And I just thought green seems open enough, and then blue seems like a pretty open color too, and I can pair them, and this is my preference. Like, these are my 2 favorite colors in the format, just from a power level perspective. So that's kind of like sitting pretty. But I also knew that I had a out, I guess, or like a backdoor into white because I had picked up that late Ox. I was sort of I knew going into pack 2 that depending on what my rare was, or if I saw some really strong cards, I could be in any kind of combination of those 3 colors if I needed to pivot. And pivot I did.
Yeah.
This deck is like almost mono white.
Yeah. Am I seeing double Guardian Sunmare?
You are. And that
Wow.
happened all in pack 2. So in pack 2, I pivoted very aggressively into white. I think opened a Guardian Sunmare, so I took it because it's a very strong card, and I thought I could be in white. And then I think 2 picks later, I saw another one. So I was like, okay, well, I guess we're definitely in white now.
Yeah.
And then it's slightly cropped out, so you can't actually see it. There is a Valor's flagship, like special art right off of screen in this screenshot. So apologies for the bad screenshot.
That's
but I got that as well really, really late in pack 2. So then I was like, okay, I mean, clearly, like,
that's a reward.
No one at this stage, everyone wants me to be in white. So okay, I'll, hands up, I'll be in white. You got me. And then I think pile up was like either my pack 1 pick 1 or pack 1 pick 2, or sorry, pack 3 pick 1 or pack 3 pick 2. That's what I mean. And that was just like, okay, well, we're already in white. This is a very strong card. Great. I also saw 2 Glory Heathlinks like midway through pack 2. So coming from that direction, there must have just been literally no one in white and some extremely strong cards that happened to be open, and they all made their way to me. And that was, I think, both a stroke of luck and just being able to navigate through pack 1 while staying at least somewhat open to that color that seemed to be somewhat open. Like, I don't think everyone would take a Bulwark Ox late in pack 1 when there's a playable blue card in the pack and you think you're in blue-green, but that's kind of my drafting style, and I think I got rewarded for it here.
It's that exact skill that you mentioned earlier, right? Where you were able to successfully pivot off of your first pick, and you really did get rewarded for it, right? I'm seeing here that you have the perfect suite of Guardian Sunmare targets too. For those that need a reminder of the card, that's the one that can, if saddled, go and tutor out something that costs 3 or less. And I see you've got the thing that I always pray they don't get, which is the Lotus Guard Disciple. It just guarantees you're going to get another tutor out of it. What were some of the other tutor targets you were thinking of here?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to get any 3-drop, but the Lotus Guard is obviously amazing because it gains you 5 and makes sure the Sunmare survives combat. That's like a Splinter Twin that Magic players joke about. My teammate Claire got me really good with the green-white deck in testing, where she just tutored out 2 Lotus Guard Disciples over multiple turns, and I was way too far behind to come back. There's also the Vehicle and Mount Lord, the Cloudspire Captain, I think it's called, in here, which is just great. Like, it pumps the Sunmare, so that can kind of change combat math if they were planning on blocking with 5 power of things. You've also got the Daring Mechanic, I think it's called. I have 2 of those, which were really nice in this deck because I had a ton of mounts. You'll see, actually, I think literally 0 vehicles besides the Valor's flagship in this deck. This is a mount vehicle synergy deck, but in this format, what you want for those are mounts because they're actual creatures, like you guys were saying earlier. You don't want too many vehicles. And the Daring Mechanic was great at just being a late game mana sink, making huge lifelinkers with my Glory Heathlinks. And then the last one, the Keen Buccaneer, I don't think I actually ever tutored for that, but if I'm getting flooded, maybe I can loot and discard a land and kind of end up net drawing me a card, which is pretty nice. So I didn't tutor for that, but it was like just a very strong card in the deck. Oh, and I even forgot, Roadside Assistance. You can also tutor with it. That card is a card I'm actually pretty high on in this format. I think the tempo swing of the life gain can often be worth a card or almost a card. So even if you get it removed, like, it's still pretty valuable. And it can turn something that normally doesn't matter a lot into a card that they just absolutely have to deal with. So I won multiple games in this draft by putting it on that Brightfield Glider on turn 3, which turns it into a 3/4 flying lifelink, which is just
interesting.
really hard to race, and they have to kill it.
So you're saying racing is good in Aether Drift?
I actually would not say that, because really it's not a very fast format at all.
Very slow.
Surprisingly enough, but it won me some games here.
Yeah, I was not high on Roadside. I actually played a game today where somebody got one on the Sloth that you have in this deck. I just couldn't get removal out, and they kept gaining
Yeah.
6 every turn, and I was like,
The sloth is absurd too. I mean,
yeah.
that feels like a rare power level card when it's getting you, and like, yeah,
I didn't realize it
sometimes
given
just
to
gets you.
indestructible at first too. I was like, yeah. The more I read the card, I'm like, wow, this really goes online if they can mount it.
Yeah, I do value that card actually pretty highly in drafts. I would say it's like a premium card. I think you really want to pick them up. Just demolishes board stalls, which is most of what happens in this format, I think.
Yeah.
Now, how did this draft turn out?
This draft was great. I trophied. I got the 3-0 to start my
Nice.
tournament, which was really great. The first 2 rounds weren't particularly close. I ended up playing against a teammate, Cam, in round 2, and they had like a pretty insane Packdoll Terror deck with like 4 of them and a clone to copy them and just a bunch of artifact recursion. But you know what's good against Packdoll Terror? Gaining like 30, 40 life.
My God,
So
yeah.
I just made some huge lynxes, and I had a sloth as well, and it just kept attacking with indestructible and like eventually kind of ground them down. And then round 3 was a lot closer. I lost the first game against, I think, a team Handshake player. Handshake is like another very, very good pro team who just playing really, really well. And I was very intimidated, but ended up getting there because I think my deck was significantly better, even though I might have made a couple gameplay mistakes. Yeah, I think that was the closest match by far, which makes sense. It was the trophy match. But I was so excited to start my tournament with a 3-0. I mean, that's obviously what you want.
Trophying a Pro Tour draft, that's awesome.
Yes.
It's also just a pride thing. Like, I'm a limited player, you know? I
Yeah.
want a really good record on the Pro Tour at limited, because, like, to be honest, not all Pro Tour drafters are very good. Like, I think the best arena grinders are probably significantly better than the like lower half of Pro Tour players in terms of draft.
Wow.
So I actually do think, I mean, gameplay wise they might be better, but in terms of like drafting skill, I think it's probably a bit different. And so there is a little bit of pride there in terms of like, if I'm a limited player, I really should be doing better than even at Pro Tour drafts. And I went even at Worlds. I know that's like not something to be disappointed in yourself in.
Not
I was
at
a
all.
little disappointed in myself. And I wanted to do better this time, and I ended up doing a little bit better, which I feel good about.
That's great. Now with that, if you could tell us a little bit about your second draft.
Yeah, well, didn't exactly do better than the first draft. I mean, not that was possible, but did a lot worse here. So this also a blue-white deck, but very clearly much more base blue. And blue was the color that I was like 100% sure I was in after pack 1. I think I got like a mid-pack Vintwixt. Is that how you pronounce it? I don't even know. The 04 that starts your engines and ends up drawing 2 cards when you have max speed whenever you draw, and an Aether Siphon. And so both of those cards, I think, both work really well together and kind of incentivize specific things in your deck building. And I was feeling quite good about where I was at leaving pack 1. I just felt like I had found the clearly open color. And then pack 2, I opened a blue-white Gearhulk. And so that's an incredible bomb. I'm easily going to take it. I also had the read that white was probably at least open enough in pack 1. Like, that was one of the other colors I was considering. And so that kind of locked me into it. At the end of pack 2, I felt really good. I had picked up 2 of my 1/3 flyers, the Skystreak Engineers, which I really like, especially in blue-white decks. They're just good at building speed, good at being relevant late. And just like a couple other good blue cards. And then pack 3, I mean, the deck you see here, like every single card that in it that you would consider like a strong Magic card was from pack 1 or 2. So there was just nothing available in pack 3. Even like creatures, just like normal playable creatures that I would want for my deck to round out a limited deck. And I knew going into pack 3, like, okay, I'm really happy with this deck, but it's a little bit creature light. That's kind of what I want to prioritize. And there was just nothing. And so I went from feeling quite good to feeling like, okay, the deck's not great, but maybe, pack 3 was rough for everyone and I can still scrape something pretty good together. And then I went to like my deck building seat and sat down and was trying to build it. And I was like, oh man, these numbers just really don't add up. This just does not feel like a fundamentally solid limited deck. I might be in trouble here. I might need to scrape out, hopefully I can 2-1 with this. Hopefully I don't 0-3 with this. And we came pretty close to that, but luckily we escaped with at least one win.
Nice.
Which ended up serving me well. But I would not recommend drafting a deck like this that looks like this, at least in Eighth Adrift.
Yeah. Now, in hindsight, is there anything you think you would have done differently in that draft, or was there anything you noticed that was really open in Pack 3 that maybe the signals just weren't there prior?
Yeah, I think Pack 3 was genuinely just very weak, and so I don't think there's a lot I could have done. It's possible I could have identified the weakness of not just having like high enough creature count earlier on. It's tough to do that when you're not able to look at your picks and you can only do like a pick review in between packs at these called drafts. But that's obviously a standard I try to hold myself to because I want to do really well in these and I want to be able to anticipate problems like that and remember all the cards I've picked. I think I could have maybe been a little bit less locked into white after I saw the Gear Hulk in Pack 2. You can see there's not a lot of white cards in this deck. Partially that's just because there's so many blue cards and blue felt very open the entire draft, but I really couldn't find any other color that was open. And I think maybe I could have done a better job of really trying to figure out like, where can I salvage just some playable bodies? And maybe I end up not playing the Gear Hulk and kind of abandoning that and just going for something more fundamentally solid. Yeah, I really wish I had the draft log for this because I feel like it's one where if I went over it, I probably could find a better path, but I unfortunately don't. It was just, happening there in real time. And I was kind of freaking out toward the end of it. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe this went off the rails. And it kind of did.
Yeah.
It can happen.
Absolutely. And I think there's maybe a good lesson to be learned from this from, I don't know, listener, you at home who maybe you've been to a pro tour, maybe you haven't. I mean, Brian is obviously an expert level drafter, and this just happened, right? This is a thing that can happen in Magic. Part of the beauty of this game is that you never know what's coming off the top of your deck. You never know what your opponent's about to cast, and you never know what you're going to get past. And I think maybe if this element of variance wasn't present in the game, it would be a worse game. But every once in a while, you do wind up in a situation like this. And I don't know. How do you feel emotionally about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel much better given that I kind of scraped it by toward the end of the day and ended up doing well enough to requalify for the next Pro Tour. I probably would have felt a lot worse if this variance had kind of happened and made me not requalify. I also just think it's a really interesting part of Magic where, like, it's a big skill to be able to ride out those variance waves and kind of take what you can from them.
Yeah.
So, my teammate Jason, again, like one of the best players in the world and someone whose limited opinions, especially, I respect a ton, helped me kind of rebuild the deck a little bit in between rounds 2 and 3. And I sideboarded a little bit differently. Obviously, you can't change your game 1 configuration, but you can change game 2 and 3. And I think it felt a little bit better and probably helped me win that last round after I was 0-2. And that's the kind of thing that, like, I think a lot of players would just kind of be like, I built the deck I built and it's kind of bad, but hopefully I'll scrape something out of it. And I was almost going to do that. And then I was sitting at the table with Jason and I was just like, is there any better way to build this? Could you have any other ideas? And I think that kind of like scrappiness and just willingness to be like, maybe I'm not seeing something here. Can you help me out? I feel like that is also just a really good skill to have, to not just give up when you run into a situation like this where you're just trying to scrape something out. And yeah, be scrappy and be willing to admit that, like, you might have missed something, I guess.
Great mindset. Well, thank you for taking us on a tour through the these decks. Personally, I love watching Pro Tour drafts. They're always a highlight for me. That being said, I am a little curious about Constructed. We're not going to dwell on this too long. This is the Draft Chaff podcast, and most Constructed decks don't contain too much Draft Chaff, so we don't have to talk about it. But what deck did you bring for Constructed, and how did the Constructed portion go?
Yeah, I actually did bring a deck that probably does have a good amount of Draft Chaff. Mono red aggro.
Nice.
First Lightning Strike. Those are some draft cards. Yeah, I mean, it's very weird. Like, I very much consider myself a limited player, but I now kind of feel more comfortable at these high level events in constructed, mainly just because you end up needing to do a lot more work preparing for constructed, and you end up feeling a lot more prepared, and like, you know, the matchups, you know, your plans going in.
Hmm.
And I felt really good about the mono red choice we had made, and so I was sort of relieved to be over with the limited rounds, which was a weird feeling for me. um, and yeah, like, I felt good about constructed. I still feel a little bit icky about feeling good about constructed. um, but yeah, like, it I think I used to think it was a less skillful aspect of Magic, and I kind of no longer think that. I mean, I do think draft is harder, but there's still so much room to improve and get better and learn. I mean, especially just because I don't have much of a background in constructed, and I'm still
Hmm.
learning so much. But yeah, it's all Magic, and Magic is really good and really hard.
I honestly just love Pro Magic so much, and hearing you talk about all this, I do feel pretty inspired. Like, try a little harder, maybe tighten up my practice a little bit. I'm going to take some of this advice to heart, and honestly, just try my best. And maybe someday I'll see you on the circuit, but
Oh,
maybe
absolutely. I
not.
mean, I love nerding out about Pro Magic. Like, it's just so cool to have the best players in the world trying their best at something. And I really think this year what I've found is like, it is really a lot more accessible, even just in terms of like being able to talk to people and kind of figure out like what it's like than you would think. Um,
Mhm.
and really, I don't know. On this side of it, it really feels like anyone can get here if they just put in the effort, put in the work, and try really hard. And don't get me wrong, it is extremely hard to qualify for the Pro Tour, mainly because there's so many people trying to do it, and Magic is a game of variance. But like, I see people sometimes say like, "Oh, well, I'm just not quite skilled enough. I don't think I could ever get there." And it's just very clear to me on this side. It's like, the players here aren't that good. I'm not that good. I'm not that different from the player I was a year ago. Like, you can do it. It just requires a little bit of luck and a lot of hard work. And I heard, you know, you qualified for an RC, and that's like the perfect opportunity. I love the RCQ system and the RC system because I think giving players a really high stakes event to like prepare their butt off for just prepares you really well for like what it takes to succeed in Magic. I'm
Mhm.
going to be preparing for the same RC. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see you there and see how it goes.
Absolutely. Now with that, we're going to transition into our Teferi and Tybalt. I'll take a deep breath. This is our Roses and Thorns style segment where we just chat a little bit about how our week is going. Tyler, why don't you kick things off? What was your Teferi from this week?
I feel like all I ever do is talk about my kid now. This is no longer a Magic podcast. It's me complaining about being a parent.
You've been a
No,
parent
okay.
for
So,
like months, dude.
but it's fair. It's been 4 months now. So it's a ferry this week. I was actually able to take off one day and just kind of spend a day with my daughter, which is really nice. It's kind of the first time I've done that since I've gone back to work, like the full day. And it was nice. You know, she's grown a lot and it's changing a lot, and it's fun to see that and experience that. But it also leads to my Tybalt, and this is going to be a real TMI, so I'm sorry for everybody. If you have a kid or a young daughter or a young child, you know what a blowout is. A blowout is when stuff leaks out of places it's not supposed to.
It's a good way to say it.
I had to throw out her outfit, the clothes I was wearing, the sheet that was like on the chain. Dude, it was Pompeii level disaster over at my household on Wednesday. So there's a fun side and a not so fun side to parenting, and the smells are definitely an interesting experience to say the least. But it was good overall. Good day.
That's some Tybalt. That may be the most Tybalt we've had on the show
Yeah,
for a long time.
it's been rough. How's your week been, Ben?
Oh, it's been good. I'll start with my Tybalt. I've got a well. As
Uh-oh.
soon as we're done recording,
Oof.
does the thickness of the stack of
Oh,
papers come across?
The
yeah,
woes of
for
teaching.
sure.
Yeah, these are gravitation exams, which actually, little Teferi within this Tybalt, my students have been crushing these, and I'm pretty proud of them for that. but it's still grading. It's got to get done. And if any of my students are listening to this, you have a homework assignment to be doing right now. I know it because I assigned it. So get off here. Happy you made it this far, but go do the homework. My Teferi this week, my students invited me to come see the school musical, which is called The Prom. Are either of you familiar with that show?
No.
It was a lot of fun. The story is loosely, there's a teenage girl who wants to invite her girlfriend to the prom, but the local school PTA gets word of it, and they secretly plan a second prom that all the students go to, leaving her by herself because it's like a homophobic community. And apparently it's inspired by real life events.
I was going to say, this sounds like a news article I read like 10 years ago. This felt very familiar.
It gets tied in with these two sort of like Broadway star types who are trying to be generous, and they come to the town and they start a riot, and it's very like pride, but then they learn about themselves and humility in the process. It was a lot of fun, and I was really happy to see that my school really committed to such an overtly gay musical. Given everything happening in the world, it was nice to see my students engaging in such a thing and in such a great way. And they're all so talented. It was fun to see. Ryan, how's your week going?
Yeah, my week is great. The week after a Pro Tour always feels like fake time, I would say, because I like prepare so hard for it, and then I sort of discount whatever happens after as like, I don't know, we'll see, we'll figure it out. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of bringing it back to Magic a little bit, but that's
of course
a lot of my life right now. So yeah, I would say my Teferi for this week, I got to see my brother who lives in Chicago for a day or so, and his partner after the tournament, which was really nice. I kind of crashed at their place before my flight on Monday. And that was really good to be able to spend some time with them, see some of their friends in Chicago. We went to their bowling league, their weekly bowling league, which was fun.
Nice.
Yeah, my arm is still a little bit sore because I hadn't bowled in a long time. But overall, it was a great experience. So that's definitely my Teferi. And then my Thorn, for people who follow me on social media, they'll know I have chronic pain, and it can make it pretty hard sometimes to just like do work and kind of do the normal amount of things someone does in a day. And I've been trying to write up a deck guide for the mono red deck I played at the Pro Tour for my Patreon, and trying to do a bunch of things this week because I'm very excited to like share all that happened in the Pro Tour testing process. And yeah, you got to slow down a little bit when you're disabled, and that kind of sucks. So that's the Thorn, or the Tybalt.
Thank you, dear listener, for joining us, and Brian, thank you for joining us as well. This has been a blast.
I feel like I've learned so much here today too. Like we kind of discussed earlier too. It's like it's so interesting hearing a pro's analytical approach to this game versus like somebody like me who's a very casual player. So again, thank you.
We vary in our spikiness. We tend to hang out mostly towards the casual end, but honestly, I feel like I want to try to get a little more serious.
It's great. I mean, it's really fun. Like, I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't the most fun way to engage in Magic for me. And I think I want everyone to engage in the way that's most fun for them.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do think that like a lot of people, and especially through Sanctum, like, getting that experience, a lot of people don't think that the more competitive side of things is for them because of this history of people being really intense and really standoffish, and it being a very cis white male space and that whole energy that comes with that. And I just think that's been changing recently. And the blend between casual and competitive, like, it's not that there are some people for whom they're smart enough to be competitive and some people who's not. It's just that it's a choice, and you get to engage with the game however you want to and whatever feels most meaningful for you. And that can change over time. And I think that's really cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. Where can listeners find you?
Yeah, so no longer really on Twitter, although I still post there a little bit sometimes, just to like share the articles I write on Patreon. So that's at Twitter, it's @Condon_. But mostly I'm on Blue Sky now, as you guys are too. So that I think is, let me just check really quick. I think it is r-condon.bluesky.social. And then I also as I've mentioned, have a Patreon where I write Magic strategy, and that is Ryan C MTG at Patreon.
Awesome. As a reminder, listener, you can also follow us. We've also abandoned Twitter, and you can follow us over on Blue Sky. By the way, we do have a giveaway going on over there right now. There's a post you can retweet. We've got a box of Duskmorn. I got it shipped from the Arena Direct, and now I'm shipping it right back out to one of our lucky followers. So if you have not yet entered that, please do. Thanks for joining us, and happy drafting. Okay, we do have a quick sign off. There is a... Yeah, I know you want to go to bed.
I'm tired, man. There's no sleep with kids anymore.
Okay. There was one Q&A question that I decided to relegate here. And I'm curious, have you ever done any cube drafting?
Yeah, I love Cube. Vintage Cube on MTG of Vintage Cube is like
Classic.
one of my favorites, but I used to have my own Cube. A lot of my friends have them. So yeah, I mean, I love Cube.
Awesome. We have a Draft Chaff Cube actually, and it made it to the Cube Con this past year. I picked up this beautiful thing from Cube Con last year too, and I'm curious if there was one card of all the Draft Chaff that you've drafted, what would you want to see show up in a Draft Chaff Cube?
I've got a perfect answer for this. So this was my other potential answer for favorite card.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of this card, Mulch. That is one of my favorite limited commons of all time from original Innistrad, the Spider Spawning deck. And I just think it's a great card because it's not good by default. You have to work to make it good, but it can be really strong. And it's a great way to just make your deck a little bit more consistent as long as you care about the graveyard a bit. So
Nice.
that card being in a cube would make me think the cube is not super high powered, so more of a limited power level, which I love, and graveyard based, which I also love, and just like full of draft chaff, exactly, like limited commons and stuff. So that would definitely... Is Mulch in the cube?
Not
It
yet.
is now.
There you go.
It's funny you say spider spawning because the black-green archetype is actually spider typal. And there's a lot of other nonsense in there. It sort of overlaps with the blue-black reanimator deck. There's sort of a Sultai-ish graveyard value thing, and then that overlaps with the blue-black-red vectors, which are more like there's some madness things going on along with the reanimator. It is basically what you described, the cube of draft chaff with some funny things that show up in there. Green-white has evolved into a Splinter Twin deck where it's like, I don't know, Midnight Guard, Presence of Gond, Life Gain combo, sort of Scurry Oak, that sort of nonsense. But honestly, I don't know how Mulch has it wound up in there already. I think we're just going to have to go toss that in there.
It's a great card. You got to put it in. I mean, there are strictly better versions that have been printed since, but